Hello and welcome to Daily News Simplified, an answer to what, why, and how of newspaper reading. Today we will discuss the articles displayed on the screen from the Delhi edition of the Hindu newspaper dated 11th July 2019. So let us start our discussion. These two articles on page number 1 and page number 9 are related to the recent cabinet decisions regarding various bills. And in the recent meeting of cabinet, all these bills have got the approval. Now these bills will now be presented in the parliament, and only if they are passed by the parliament and receive an assent from the president, they will become acts. And some of these important bills include the Worker Safety Code Bill, the Single Tribunal to hear water disputes or the interstate river water disputes. Third is the bill to tackle Ponzi schemes. It has also given green light to rural roads. A Railway Protection Force will now be given the status of Group A. There is a bill for provisions of death penalty for child abuse, and also there is a bill regarding the transgenders. Now all these are presently in the bill form, and they will only become act when they are passed by both the houses of the parliament and they receive the assent of the president. So for all those who have just started their preparation, it is important to know the key objectives of these bills and what would be the likely impact of these bills if they get passed and get converted into acts or laws. And once these bills are passed and they become acts or laws, the detailed provisions of all these acts will be discussed in the DNS videos when they are passed. So presently in this discussion, our focus will be on knowing the objectives of all these bills and what would be the likely impact of these bills if they are passed and they become laws. So first in this line, let us take up the Interstate River Water Disputes Bill. So regarding the resolutions of interstate river water disputes, the Constitution has provided a unique mechanism. So here it is important to note that for other federal disputes, that is the disputes between center and the states or disputes between any two states, the Supreme Court has the original and exclusive jurisdiction. And the Supreme Court has this jurisdiction only for all disputes between the states or between center and the states, other than the issues of river water disputes. And regarding the interstate river water disputes, the Constitution provides that under the Article 262, the Parliament may by law provide for the adjudication of any dispute or complaint with respect to the use, distribution or control of waters of any interstate river or river valley. And in accordance with this, the Parliament has enacted the Interstate River Water Disputes Act of 1956. And in the present cabinet decision, it has been decided that this Interstate River Water Disputes Act will now be amended and it will provide for only one single tribunal at the center. And regarding the present provisions of the Interstate River Water Disputes, you should note that whenever riparian states or states which are involved in the interstate river water disputes are not able to reach the amicable agreements on their own in the sharing of interstate river waters, the Interstate River Water Dispute Act provides for dispute resolution process in the form of tribunals. So first, the states which are involved in the disputes have to resolve the issue amicably. However, if they are not able to reach any agreement, this act provides for the process of dispute resolution in the form of tribunals. Now, this present act of 1956 empowers the central government to set up an ad hoc tribunal for the adjudication of a dispute between two or more states in relation to the waters of an interstate river valley or river valley dispute. And the decision of this tribunal would be final and binding on the parties which are involved in the dispute. And further, there is bar on the jurisdiction of Supreme Court in this regard. So it provides that neither the Supreme Court nor any other court shall have or exercise jurisdiction in respect of any river water dispute which may be referred to a tribunal under this Act of 1956. So what this means is that no state can proceed to either the Supreme Court or any other court during the course of proceedings at the tribunal, which means that when a matter is under consideration of the ad hoc tribunal which is created by the central government, these state parties which are involved in the dispute cannot approach the Supreme Court or any other court in this regard. And when these ad hoc tribunals issue a final verdict, and if they are notified by the central government under the official gazette, the verdict becomes law and becomes binding on the states for the implementation. However, once the verdict has been given by the tribunal, there is no bar on the parties involved in approaching the Supreme Court. So only after the decision has been made by the tribunal, the concerned parties can approach the Supreme Court. So now the biggest issue with the implementation of this Interstate River Water Disputes Act of 1956 was that the center used to create ad hoc tribunals. So which means that the central government created ad hoc tribunals only when a dispute started and the concerned parties approach the central government for the resolution of such a dispute. And this also means that the tribunal was not a permanent one. Now, due to this ad hoc nature of the tribunals, the river water disputes have continued for decades, and the resolution of such disputes has been delayed at times. So, that is why this new bill or the amendment to the Interstate River Water Disputes Bill provides that there will be a permanent single tribunal at the center, and which will look into all the disputes of river waters. So in the present cabinet decision, the central government has decided to amend the Interstate River Water Disputes Act of 1956, and it has provided for the constitution of a permanent tribunal at the center which will decide on all the interstate river water disputes. Which means that the new act will do away with the provisions of creating ad hoc tribunals for the resolution of interstate river water disputes. Further, the mandate of this permanent tribunal will be larger as compared to the ad hoc tribunals which were being created. This is because it will also create an agency to collect, maintain all relevant water data like rainfall, water flow, irrigation area, etc. And this will provide a clear picture regarding the issue of river water dispute between both the states. And as we all know that presently the center currently sets up ad hoc tribunals under this act. And so far, 8 tribunals have been constituted. And the biggest likely benefit of the constitution of a permanent tribunal is that it will speed up the process of interstate river water disputes. And this is because an agency will be created which will collect and maintain all relevant water data. And also, whenever the states which are involved in the disputes approach the central government, they will refer that matter to this permanent tribunal. So that is why the need for creating new ad hoc tribunals will be done away with. And if this tribunal will be permanent, it will have the expertise to resolve the issues related to interstate river water disputes. Further details of this single tribunal will be provided as and when this bill becomes an act when it is passed by the parliament. However, from preliminary examination point of view, you need to know that regarding interstate river water disputes, there is a different and unique mechanism which has been provided in the Constitution under the Article 262. And the manner in which these interstate river water disputes are resolved is different from other disputes between the states, for example, any boundary dispute between states, etc. And for that, the Supreme Court has original and exclusive jurisdiction. After this, let us take up the next important cabinet decision which has been taken by the government. The second important decision in the cabinet meeting was related to the approval for the launch of Pradhan Mantri Gram Sadak Yojana 3. So the third phase of the Pradhan Mantri Gram Sadak Yojana has been approved in the recent cabinet meeting. Now the background is that it was announced in the budget speech of year 2018 and 19. Now what is the objective of this third phase of the Pradhan Mantri Gram Sadak Yojana? So the objective is that it involves consolidation of routes and major rural links connecting habitations to the Grameen agricultural markets, higher secondary schools and hospitals. And this would facilitate easy and faster movement to and from the Grameen agricultural markets, higher secondary schools and hospitals. So it integrates economic, educational as well as social or the health related aspects. So the major focus of this scheme or the third phase of the Pradhan Mantri Gram Sadak Yojana is the consolidation of the rural roads. And the project period for the completion of Pradhan Mantri Gram Sadak Yojana's third phase is from 2019-20 to 2024 and 25. Now the implementing ministry of this scheme is the Ministry of Rural Development and not the Ministry of Transportation. So this is an important aspect for us from the preliminary examination point of view that the implementing agency of the Pradhan Mantri Gram Sadak Yojana is the Ministry of Rural Development and it is not the Ministry of Road and Transport. So after this, let us also look at the initial Pradhan Mantri Gram Sadak Yojana and what was its objective. So it was launched in December 2000 and the objective was to provide single all-weather road connectivity to eligible unconnected habitations of designated population size, which was about 500 plus population in the plain areas and 250 plus populations in the northeastern, hill areas, tribal areas, and desert areas. And this was to be based on the census of 2001. And the main objective or the overall objective was the socio-economic development of these areas through the construction of rural roads. And the present status is that almost 97% of the eligible and feasible habitations have already been connected by all-weather roads. So here the implementing agency, the main objective of this new phase, and the period of completion are important for us from the preliminary examination point of view. Another important decision is related to the proposed amendment in the Protection of Child from Sexual Offences Act 2012 or the POCSO Act of 2012. And these new amendments propose the provisions for death penalty for child abuse. So first let us look at the key features of the POCSO Act of 2012. So this act was enacted to protect the children from offences of sexual assault, sexual harassment, and pornography, and it provides for safeguarding the interests and well-being of the children. Further, who all are considered as children under this act? So this act defines a child as any person below the age of 18 years. And one of the most important provision of this act is that this act is gender neutral. So it includes all kinds of sexual offences against both the male child as well as the girl child. Now what are the proposed amendments? So these provide for making the punishment more stringent for committing sexual crimes against children, and they also involve the provisions of death penalty. And the amendments also provide for levying of heavy fines and imprisonment to curb the menace of child pornography. And what are the expected impacts of these amendments? So it is expected to discourage the trend of child sexual abuse by acting as a deterrent. And this deterrence will be created by providing for strong penal provisions with regards to offences of sexual assault against children. Further, these amendments intend to protect the interests of vulnerable children in the times of distress and ensures their safety and dignity. And these are also aimed at establishing clarity regarding the aspects of child abuse and punishments. So this is also a proposal, and only if this gets passed by the Parliament, this will become an act. And that is when it will be covered in detail in the DNS. Now another important decision is related to the Code on Occupational Safety, Health and Working Conditions Bill 2019. Now the present condition or the situation of occupational safety, health and working conditions is that there are specific laws for specific sectors. And there is no overarching law which covers all the sectors of the economy and the safety and health and working conditions of the workers. So now the proposal of this bill enhances the coverage of safety, health and working conditions, and it extends them beyond the present 13 sectors which have been covered under various laws. And also this new code will amalgamate, simplify and rationalize the relevant provisions of the 13 Central Labour Acts. For example, the new bill will amalgamate the Factories Act of 1948, the Mines Act, Building and Other Construction Workers Act, the Plantation Labour Act, Contract Labour Act, Interstate Migrant Workmen Act, the Motor Transport Workers Act, BD and Cigar Workers Act, etc. And all these 13 acts will now be subsumed in the new code. And once they are subsumed in the new code, all these acts will be repealed. So the basic objective is that to extend the provisions of safety, health and working conditions beyond these sectors which are included only in these laws. So the likely and the most important benefit of such an act or overarching act will be that it will extend the safety and health working conditions to all workforce of the country. And further, it will extend these protections from existing about 9 major sectors to all the establishments having 10 or more employees. So this extends the coverage drastically. And these provisions will cover almost all the sectors of the economy. So this is a major step in the welfare of the labour and the working conditions. Now another important decision has been taken regarding the bill for tackling the Ponzi schemes or the unregulated deposit schemes. Now before the dissolution of Lok Sabha, this bill was introduced in the Lok Sabha in February 2019 and it was passed by Lok Sabha. However, this bill lapsed because the Lok Sabha was dissolved, and that is why this bill has been taken up freshly and will be once again introduced in the Lok Sabha and will be considered for passage in the Rajya Sabha. So that is why it was covered in the DNS of 7th February 2009 when it was approved by the cabinet at that point of time. Now, unregulated or illegal deposit schemes are those schemes which are not registered with either SEBI, RBI, or the state governments. Now, as these deposit schemes are unregulated, they pose threat and risk to the investors. And the investors in such kind of schemes are generally small and marginal investors who are investing their savings in such schemes. And for the first time, this issue was highlighted by the finance minister in the budget speech of 2016 and 17. And this budget speech provided for creation of a comprehensive legislation. So the main features of this bill are that any such small deposit scheme will now have to be registered with either RBI, SEBI, or the Securities Exchange Board of India and the state governments. And this bill will also define what will be the offences under such schemes. So running of any unregulated deposit scheme will now be considered as an offence under this bill. Further, any default under this regulated deposit scheme or the inability to pay back to the depositors will also be considered as an offence. This bill also provides for the interests and the grievances of the investors or the small and marginal investors, and it provides for repayment of these deposits to the investors. Further, it will provide for designation of courts which will try the offences related to such unregulated deposit schemes or the Ponzi schemes. And another important provision is related to the implementation, and it provides for online centralized database for all such deposit taking activities. And the state governments will have the primary responsibility of tackling the menace of unregulated deposit schemes and the Ponzi schemes. So the details will further be discussed as and when this bill becomes an act. Further, two other important decisions of the cabinet include the giving of Group A status to the Railway Protection Force officers. And the central government was directed by the High Court in a decision to give the Group A status to the Railway Protection Force employees. So in accordance with this, the central government in its cabinet decision has accorded the status of Group A to the Railway Protection Force. And the major objective of doing this is to end the stagnation of the employees' career progression and to improve the motivational levels of the employees who are employed in the Railway Protection Force. Further, the cabinet has also approved the introduction of the Transgender Persons Bill 2019. So here you should note that presently there is no bill dealing with the social, economic and educational empowerment of the transgender persons. So in accordance with this bill provides a mechanism for their social, economic and educational improvement. And the likely impact is that this will benefit a large number of transgender persons. It will mitigate the stigma which is attached with such person. Also, it will try to reduce the discrimination and abuse against this marginal section of the society. And finally, it will lead to inclusiveness and will make the transgender persons productive members of our society. And further, as and when this bill gets passed and converts into a law, we will discuss that in detail in the DNS. So the basic objective of discussing all these cabinet decisions was that you get introduced to the important issues that are being taken up by the government of India. However, generally the questions on various bills are not asked in the mains examination, and only when these bills becomes acts or law, they are likely to be asked in the mains examination. That is why we have just introduced and provided you with the objective of all these decisions, and detailed discussions on major provisions of these bills once they become acts will be discussed in the consequent DNS videos. So with this, let's move to the next article. This article on page number 10 talks about the demographic window of opportunity. And this article has been written in the recent context of a report which was released by the United Nations. And this report highlights that the population of India is expected to overtake China by 2027. So in this background, this article discusses as to how the Indian government must manage its human resources efficiently, and also how Indian government should integrate the population policy into developmental policies. So this will form a part of the General Studies paper 3 under the topic Indian economy and also the topic employment and development. So in this we will try to understand what are the points which are being highlighted by the author. Now, as the UN report highlights that the Indian population will overtake that of China by 2027, what are the options that are available with India regarding the reduction of population growth rate? So, in this background, first the author highlights the limitation of the punitive actions or the disincentives for not producing children. Now, in the past, various measures like restrictions on maternity leave, disqualification from panchayat elections for more than two children, and various other measures have been undertaken. However, these measures have not led to any decrease in the population growth rate. So, regarding these punitive actions, the author says that these are not strong enough to overcome the desire for children, as the people who desired larger families go ahead in spite of such disincentives or negative consequences. And this is reflected from the sharp differences in the total fertility rate among the different socio-economic groups in India. Regarding total fertility rate, you should note that it is the number of children that a woman has given birth to or is likely to give birth to in her lifetime. So the ideal total fertility rate is about 2.1, which reflects the replacement level fertility. So if a woman gives birth to only two children in her lifetime, this will lead to the stabilization of population and there will not be any increase in the population. So if you look at the total fertility rate of the poorest women, it is about 3.2 in India, which means that on an average in the poorest section of the society, the women are giving birth to more than 3 children. However, when the total fertility rate of the rich women is calculated, it is about 1.5 only. So this shows that the rich women are giving birth to less number of children as compared to the poor women. And although the poor women have various economic disadvantages, and despite that they are giving birth to more children. So in this regard, the author says that the lower total fertility rate among richer households is because of their desire to invest in their children's education and future prospects. And that is why rich people are moving towards having only one child. Further, the richer individuals see greater potential for ensuring admission to good colleges and better jobs for their children. And this inspires them to limit their family size. So to reduce the population, it has been highlighted that we must focus on reducing the total fertility rate among the poor households. And this can be done by improving the access to education and ensuring better jobs for their children. And this will act as an incentive and will increase the aspiration of the poor. And that is how they will try to limit the size of their family. However, these positive incentives should also be complemented along with the contraceptive services, etc. So in short, it has been highlighted by the author that for reducing the total fertility rate among the poorer households, it is important to improve the access to education and the access to better jobs for children. Now, after focusing on the ways to reduce the population growth rate, the author has further highlighted the integration of population policy into developmental policies. Now, as we all know that the Finance Commission has the responsibility of creating a formula for the distribution of taxes among various states. And in this regard, the 15th Finance Commission plans to use the 2011 census data for the distribution of taxes among the states. So the 2011 population data will be one of the factors or criteria for arriving at a formula for the distribution of taxes among various states. Now previously, the 14th Finance Commission had used the 1971 census data. And you should also know that this data is also used by the Delimitation Commission in arriving at the number of constituencies for Lok Sabha. And this 1971 data was adopted with the purpose of controlling the population growth in India. Now, this intention of the 15th Finance Commission regarding the use of 2011 census data has become a contentious issue, and it is being opposed by the southern Indian states. Now, why are the southern states opposing the use of 2011 census data by the 15th Finance Commission for the distribution of taxes among the states? Now, if you look at the demographic growth rate of the southern states versus the northern states, the southern states have witnessed lower population growth rates and higher economic growth rate. However, as compared to the southern states, the northern states have witnessed high population growth rate and lower economic growth rate. So that is why the southern states think that the policy of using of 2011 census data by the 15th Finance Commission would penalize them for taking efforts to reduce the population, and it would implicitly reward the populous states which may not have implemented the population control measures strictly. Now, as the northern states have more population as compared to the southern states, they are likely to get a bigger share in the distribution of taxes. And that is why the southern states are opposing this move. Now, explaining the situation of South India versus North India, the author highlights that different states in India are at different stages of demographic transition. So, before understanding this, let us look at what is meant by this demographic transition theory. Now, this theory is based on the population growth rates which have been witnessed in the developed countries of the world. And this growth trajectory of the developed countries has been divided into various stages. Now, the first stage includes the stage of high fluctuation. And this is when both the birth rates as well as the death rates are very high. Now, as the death rates are very high, the population does not increase much. Further, in the second stage, with the advancement in the medicine and the medical sciences, the death rate is reduced considerably, as can be seen from this line. Further, in this second stage, as the birth rate is already high, while the death rate has dropped considerably, there is huge expansion in the population, and this is termed as the natural increase in population. And this is shown by the shaded area in this graph. So this stage represents the high growth rate stage or the expansion in population of a nation. However, towards the end of this stage, even the birth rate starts declining. And as a country enters the third stage of demographic transition, it is known as low fluctuating stage. And in this stage, the death rate has already been reduced. However, the birth rate also reduces. And as a result, in this stage, a country witnesses the stabilization or decrease in its population. And this is clearly visible in the population growth rates of Japan, which is seeing a decline in the population, and the population in Canada and USA has already stabilized. Now, different states in India are at different stages of demographic transition. So, as author has highlighted, for example, Kerala and Tamil Nadu are already past their demographic dividend stage, which means that these states will witness aging population after a point of time. However, states like Karnataka still have this opportunity, and this opportunity will be available to the state of Karnataka for next 20 years only. With regards to the northern states, the states like UP and Bihar, their population is still increasing and they are expected to peak much later. So simply we should understand that the population growth rate in the states of Kerala and Tamil Nadu has started decreasing. However, the population is still increasing in the states of UP and Bihar, and it will take much more time as compared to the Kerala and Tamil Nadu to reach their peak, and from when the population will start decreasing. So this will take a longer period of time for the states of UP and Bihar or the other northern states. So in such a scenario, the author says that the states with higher share of workers would be able to contribute to higher revenue to the center. And such higher revenue can in turn be used to support the states with higher share of aging population. For example, author highlights that the workers in Haryana can support aging population of Kerala in future. Now the author argues that the usage of 1971 census would be a big mistake on the part of central government and the 15th Finance Commission. This is because if 1971 census is used, the states which are having high population and high young population will not be able to provide that population with improved education and health facilities. And this is because they will have a reduced share in the distribution of taxes. On the other hand, the author has suggested that the 15th Finance Commission and other policies should stick to 2011 census. And in this manner, high share in the distribution of taxes will be provided to the northern states which are having high population growth rate and have high population. And by utilizing this high share in the taxes, these states can focus on improved education and health facilities for the young or the demographic dividend. And in this manner, this demographic dividend or this window of opportunity can be used for higher growth rates of these states. And the revenue which is extracted by the center from the high growth rate of these states can be used for supporting the high share of aging population in the states of Kerala, Tamil Nadu, etc. So simply the focus should be on human capital formation, and this can only be provided if the 2011 census is used and high distribution of taxes go to the states which are having high population or high population growth rate. So these are few facts regarding the way in which the government should integrate its developmental or the population policy with the developmental programs and policies. With this, let's move to the next article. Now, the issue of trade and tariff has been going on between India and US. And in this background, the United States Trade Representative team is likely to meet the Indian officials. And they are likely to discuss various issues regarding the tariff tensions between India and US. And one of the contentious issue in this is the withdrawal of the United States of the generalized system of preference status in the April. So although this is a news in transition, we have already covered this issue of generalized system of preference in the DNS of 6th March 2019. So for all those students who have just joined and have just started their preparation, let us once again revise the issue of generalized system of preferences and various aspects of the withdrawal of generalized system of preferences by the US for the Indian exports. So let us revise the issue of generalized system of preferences from the previous video of 6th March 2019. So this becomes an important part for us from the General Studies paper 3 under the topic Economic Development. Now here you should note that the withdrawal of GSP by the United States of America is a sign of protectionism in world trade. And here you should note that the World Trade Organization strives for free trade across countries, which means that the countries should not discriminate against each other in terms of their trade. And this principle has been envisaged in the most favored nation principle of the WTO. So any step which goes against the principle of free trade which has been proposed by the WTO is seen as a sign of protectionism. So here also this withdrawal of GSP is being seen as a sign of protectionism. And you should note that in the year 2018, in the mains examination, a question was asked related to the impact of protectionism on Indian economy. So the question reads, how would the recent phenomena of protectionism and currency manipulations in world trade affect the macroeconomic stability of India? So similarly, you can expect questions regarding the impact of the United States' withdrawal of the generalized system of preference on Indian economy. So now before understanding the impact of the withdrawal of GSP by the US on India, let us understand what is meant by GSP, what are the benefits that are accrued under GSP, and where does the GSP stands vis-a-vis WTO. So let us first revise this, and after that we will learn about the impact of this withdrawal on Indian economy. So regarding GSP, you should note that the Generalized System of Preference is a US trade program, and it started in the year 1976. Now this program is designed to promote economic growth in developing countries, and it aims to do so by providing duty-free entry for up to 4,800 products. And these products should be from 129 designated countries or beneficiary countries. So basically this means that under the GSP program, United States allows certain countries to export their products to United States with zero tariff imposed on them. Now what are the benefits of this GSP scheme? Now this GSP scheme provides opportunity to the world's poorest or the developing countries. This is because these poor or developing countries can export to United States without any tariff being imposed on them. And this can in turn promote economic activity in their countries, and this will help them in growing their economies. However, this program is also beneficial for America itself. This is because it increases the competitiveness in the American market. This is because it reduces the costs of imported inputs which are used by the US companies to manufacture goods. So simply this program benefits the developing and the poorest countries by growing their economies, and it also helps in increasing the competitiveness in the American market. Now after understanding the GSP and the benefits of GSP, let us understand what is the relation between WTO and the Generalized System of Preferences. Now one of the important rule of WTO is that under their normal trade laws, the WTO members must give equal preferences to its trade partners. This means that there should not be any discrimination between the countries in terms of trade. And this trade rule under the WTO is called as the Most Favored Nation Clause. So simply this MFN clause states that there cannot be any discrimination between two countries in terms of their trade, which means that a country cannot impose discriminatory tariff barriers for trade with other countries. So this MFN clause strives for creating an equality in terms of trade between countries. However, This allows certain exceptions to this MFN clause. In this sense, the WTO allows its members to give special and differential treatment to developing or poor countries. Now, as this special and differential treatment can only be given to developing countries or poor countries, such a special or differential treatment cannot be given to developed countries. Now, for example, by providing zero tariff on imports, the US under its GSP is providing special treatment to the developing and the poor countries. So this generalized system of preference that is given by the United States to the developing countries is included as an exception to the MFN clause under the WTO rules. So this is an important point and should be kept in mind from your preliminary examination point. Now, after understanding what is GSP and what are the benefits under GSP, let us understand what is the recent decision of United States. So in this line, you should understand that the US intends to terminate the India's designation as a beneficiary of its generalized system of preferences. So here you should note that India has been the biggest beneficiary of this generalized system of preferences regime. And you should note that in the year 2017, if 100 items got duty-free access in the United States, or the items which are imported into the US without any duty, 25% of these items were from India. So this shows that India was the biggest beneficiary of this GSP system. And as can be seen in this bar graph, India had the highest benefit of the duty-free exports to the United States as compared to other countries. And the exports stood at around $5.58 billion, which was around 12% of the total goods export of around $45 billion to the US. So 12% of the total exports to the US was under this GSP regime. And also you should note that the US stands at a trade deficit in terms of goods at about $22 billion in 2017, which means that India has a trade surplus vis-a-vis trade with US. So these were some of the benefits that India accrued under the GSP system. Now, after understanding the benefits that India had under this GSP regime, let us look at the possible impacts of this withdrawal of GSP system by the United States of America. So first is that it could impact India's competitiveness in items like raw materials, and especially in the organic chemicals section, which has the highest value under the GSP exports from India. And besides raw materials like the organic chemical sector, intermediary goods like the iron and steel, furniture, aluminium and electrical machinery exports under the GSP could also be impacted. And they will reduce the competitiveness of the Indian products as compared to other countries. Now, regarding the organic chemicals, which has the highest value under the GSP exports, it stands at $1.4 billion in 2017. So, according to the Commerce Ministry, about 1,900 products exported to the US under the GSP may be impacted due to this withdrawal. Now, although it is being said that India has the highest share amongst the GSP imports in US, for example, the total GSP imports into US is around $20.77 billion. And out of these $20 billion, almost 25% of it is being exported from the India. So now, although the export share of India under the GSP is highest, the Indian government has said that there will be limited impact on the exports from India. Now, the government has said that it will have a limited impact on the exports from India. And in this line, the government has clarified that Indian exporters were receiving only duty-free benefits of the tune of only $190 million out of the total GSP exports of $5.6 billion, which means that the duty-free access was available only to the exports worth $190 million. So the government has clarified that the value of exports other than these 190 million exports will not be impacted by this withdrawal of US. Further, it has also been said that India is diversifying its trade partners. And in this line, it has been said that India is diversifying its markets in the Latin American countries, in the African region, etc. So in this case, the government thinks that even if the US withdrawal impacts the exports to the US, Indian exports have already started entering the markets of other global south countries like Latin American and African countries. That is why the overall impact on the Indian exports would be limited. Now, the critics have highlighted that the exports from India could be impacted due to this decision of United States. In this line, it has been highlighted that Indian exporters will be hit if the United States government does not stop the GSP for other competitor countries. Now, for example, if the GSP is withdrawn from a particular product that is exported from India, and if the same GSP is not withdrawn for the other countries, the exporters from those countries will have an edge over the Indian product. So that is why the competitiveness of the Indian exports could be impacted. So, in the absence of GSP, the orders which were meant for India or the exports which should have gone to America from India would now go to the other GSP countries because they will have a lower price as compared to the Indian exports. Further, it has been highlighted that this move of the United States will impact the small industries. This is because majority of products that were exported under the GSP were from the small industries or the MSME sector. Further, export bodies in India have said that the small industries would lose their market share in the US if this GSP system is withdrawn. So, in this case, they have highlighted that these industries will need a fiscal support to maintain their competitive edge. Now, here it is important to note that these changes which have been announced by the US will take at least 60 days to come into effect. This is because this measure of the US will also have to be ratified by the United States Congress. So, in the meantime, India still has got the time for negotiations. Now, one of the steps that India could take is the retaliatory tariff barriers. And in this line, you should note that India had intended to impose higher tariffs on 29 goods imported from the US as retaliation. And this retaliation was against the imposition of heavy tariff on the import of steel and aluminum products in the US. Now, although the impact of the withdrawal of GSP has been downplayed by the government of India, and some sections are proposing retaliatory tariff barriers, however, it is said that India should always be open to discussions with the US, and also internal discussions should take place to have more clarity on the impact of the US withdrawal of GSP. And it is only through the discussions that India and US can have mutually beneficial trade relations. Now, after going through some of the points that we have discussed in this article, you should try and answer this question from your mains examination point of view. And with this, let us move on to the next article. Now, this article on page number 9 reads that the Indian Air Force will adopt the Advanced Short Range Air to Air Missile, and this missile will be added to its fighter fleet. So, this becomes important for us from the preliminary examination point of view. So, what is important for us from the preliminary examination point of view are the key aspects of this Advanced Short Range Air to Air Missile. So, let us understand some facts related to this ASRAAM. So, as the name suggests, it is a short range and air to air missile. And further, this advanced short range air to air missile will be added to the Sukhoi 30 MKI fighter jets in Indian Air Force fleet. And this ASRAAM will replace the Russian made Wimpel R-73 missile. So, regarding this ASRAAM, you should note that it is within visual range air dominance missile with a range of over 25 kilometers, and that is why it is known as a short range missile. Further, it is an air-to-air missile, and it works on the principle of infrared homing missile or the heat-seeking missile. So these are few facts related to the ASRAAM air-to-air missile, which will be integrated with the Sukhoi fleet of the Indian Air Force. And this can be important aspect for us from the preliminary examination point of view. After this, let us take up another article. After today's discussion, you should try and answer these questions. The answer will be displayed after 5 seconds. The first question reads, consider the following statements. The first statement reads, Interstate River Water Disputes Act 1956 has created a single permanent tribunal for the resolution of interstate disputes. Now this is incorrect because this is a proposal under the amendments which are proposed to the Interstate River Water Dispute Act of 1956. And this particular act provided for the creation of ad hoc tribunals for the resolution of interstate river water disputes. The second statement reads, concerned states can approach Supreme Court even when the matter is under the course of proceedings with the River Water Tribunal. This statement is also incorrect. This is because there is bar on approaching the Supreme Court during the course of proceedings with the River Water Tribunal. Hence here the correct answer is D, that is neither statement 1 nor statement 2 are correct. Second question reads, with reference to the Pradhan Mantri Gram Sadak Yojana, consider the following statements. The first statement is that the nodal ministry for implementation is Ministry of Road and Transport, which is incorrect because it is the Ministry of Rural Development which is the nodal ministry. The second statement reads, the Pradhan Mantri Gram Sadak Yojana first provided for all-weather road connectivity to unconnected habitations of designated population size based on the census of 2011, which is incorrect because it was based on the census of 2001. Hence the correct answer here is D, that is neither 1 nor 2. Further, you should try and answer both these questions and the answer will be displayed after 5 seconds. So this question reads, which of the following are correct about the demographic transition theory? The first statement reads, the first stage is marked by population explosion, which is incorrect because in the initial phase, the birth rate is high as well as the death rate is high. And that is why the population is although fluctuating, but there is no such population explosion. In the second stage, the birth rate is lower as compared to the death rate, which is also incorrect because even in the second stage, the death rate decreases drastically because of the improvement in medical conditions. However, the birth rate is high. The third statement reads, in the third stage, both the birth rate and the death rate are low and they reflect a stage of low population fluctuation, which is correct. Hence, the correct answer is C. Fourth question is pretty simple and it reads that the ASRAAM or the ashram often mentioned in news is related to which of the following? So as we have learned today that it is a air-to-air missile which will be fitted with the Sukhoi. So the correct answer here is B. With this we have come to the end of today's discussion. Now let's move on to the question for the day.